Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Ben Vicarage on this, Thursday morning. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today. And friends, as we continue our adventures with the book of Genesis, today we're in chapter 28. Very, very famous chapter, this one. The famous chapter, what's known as Jacob's Ladder. So, without further ado, here we go. Genesis chapter 28. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him, "You shall not marry one of the Canaanite women. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and numerous, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give to you the blessing of Abraham, to you and to your offspring with you, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, land that God gave to Abraham." Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, and that he had blessed him as he blessed him, he charged him, "You shall not marry one of the Canaanite women," and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan Aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please his father Isaac, Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalath, daughter of Abraham's son Ishmael, and the sister of Nebaioth, to be his wife, in addition to the wives he had. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, on top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give you, and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth will be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you. I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised to you." Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." So Jacob rose early in the morning. He took the stone that he put under his head and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, so the context here is that Jacob has stolen his brother's birthright, and also with a bit of help from his mother has essentially tricked his father into giving him the blessing as well. And at this point, Rebecca says to Isaac, and they agree on this point. It's about the time Jacob went away to protect him from his brother, who you notice gets increasingly angry as the chapter goes on, and essentially marries a Canaanite woman to sort of spite his mum and his father, which is kind of quite interesting. So to protect Jacob, and also I think they realise just what a trickster Jacob is, they decide to send him away to Laban, who was his uncle, to try and find one of his daughters to get him to marry there instead. And I think what this is essentially doing in this first half of the chapter is reinforcing the fact that despite the shenanigans that have happened in the last couple of chapters, actually Jacob is now the one on who the promise is going to be. The promise will be on Jacob and not on Esau. And so you have Isaac, who had been reluctant in the previous chapter because he'd been tricked out of doing, because Esau had been his favourite. You have Isaac himself blessing Jacob. You also have the reminder here that he has the God of Abraham will be his God. There's very much a connection saying that the blessing of Jacob, the blessing of Abraham and Isaac will be on Jacob. And they're also very keen to make sure that he marries an appropriate, suitable person. to make sure he's just sort of, because they recognise, I think, that Jacob is a trickster and a usurper. So to make sure that he kind of kept in check, I think that's why they send him off to Laban to marry one of his daughters, to make sure he marries a suitable person to kind of keep him in check. So in this first kind of third of the chapter, you have very much the reinforcement of the fact that Jacob now is the one who's going to be blessed. That whatever's happened in the past, Isaac can see it as well. Jacob is now the blessed one. They send him away to marry a suitable person, and you find Isaac blessing Jacob. So you very much get this impression here that as God was with Abraham and God was with Isaac, so now the promise is well and truly on Jacob. That's the first thing. So he leaves Beersheba, and you very much get the impression Jacob's at one of the kind of low points of his life. I think he must realise how angry his brother is, and he's been sent away. And he has when he goes away, he sits down in this certain place that becomes known as Bethel, and there he has this dream, this famous dream of what's called Jacob's ladder. And Jacob sees this dream of this ladder, or this ramp, if you like, more like ramp really, going up to heaven, and angels coming up and going down. And that here, this kind of is the ladder to heaven. And you very much also get the impression that for the first time in his life, Jacob actually meets God. Jacob so far has been a kind of jumped up younger son and so on. And this is the first time that Jacob actually meets God. And at this time when he's almost certainly fearful of his life, when he's gone away on his own, he hasn't got a wife or any friends or anything like that. He kind of goes away on his own, a kind of low point of his life. At this point here, he meets God in this incredible dream, this famous dream that he has. So Jacob, as I say, was an interesting and a flowery character, you might say. But he actually, for the first time ever, he has his personal encounter with God. And he meets God as he finds himself out there. And he knows that good, and he recognises then that he then finds that the same God that was with his granddad, Abraham, with his dad, Isaac, is now his God as well. So he has this famous dream. But I think what's interesting here is that, he says that God was in this place and I did not see it. Now, you've then got to spool forward 2,000 or 3,000 years to the time of Jesus, when in John chapter 1, when Jesus is just beginning his ministry, and he encounters somebody called Nathaniel. Nathaniel, of course, is commonly thought by many people to have been the same person as Bartholomew, of whom our church is named here at St. Bart's. And Jesus meets Nathaniel and tells Nathaniel that you saw him under a fig tree. Nathaniel, how can you possibly know that you clearly are the main man? And then Jesus says, essentially, you won't see nothing yet. You're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And that's a clear reference to here. So what Jesus is saying is that as Jacob saw the ladder, and as that ladder was the ladder to heaven, the angels coming down, so likewise in Jesus, he is the way to God today. And that when we meet Jesus in our lives, we meet God. And as Jacob could say, God was in this place and I didn't recognize it. Actually, in Jesus, we have God with us. And as he saw the gates of heaven, the road to heaven, the ladder to heaven even, with angels coming up and going down, that's actually who we have in Jesus. Jesus is the way, as well as the truth and the life as well. But finally at the end, you have this, Jacob, you get in the last 2 or 3 verses, kind of processing what he's seen. He hasn't never met God before, and now he meets God, and he essentially says, and God says, I will look after you. And it's interesting at the end that he says, if God looks after you, I'll give God 1/10 of everything that I have. And I think there's a reminder here also of the importance actually of giving in response to what God's given to us. And I think it's important to remember that in terms of our time, but also, dare I say, in terms of our money as well. It's important that we give God appropriately, that God has been kind to us, and therefore we should give God in thanks. Not to earn God's gratitude. God doesn't need our gifts, but actually, as God's been good to us, so we should be good and we should give in thanksgiving as well. The word Eucharist, that we have every Sunday, it's a Greek word, and it means thanksgiving. And it's important that we thank God, and that we thank God not only as in our time, but also in terms of our money, in terms of our ambitions and things that we want in our lives. That we remember that God has been good to us, and therefore it's important that we give things and do things, not to earn God's love. God loved us before we were even born, but as a way of saying thank you for what God has done for us. And in Jacob's case, he says, I'll give away a tenth of everything that I have. My friends, bless you. I hope you find that interesting. Do compare it with, if you got some time today, with John chapter 1. I think it's about verses 52, something like that. Jesus' encounter with Nathaniel. It's a fascinating story. There's the interesting character, Jacob, and he's being sent away at his low point of his life, his encounter with God and meeting God for the first time. And that God can turn him around, this interesting character that he was, that God worked with him, God appeared to him. But as he met God at Bethel, so we meet God in Jesus. My friends, bless you. Have a lovely day. Thank you for watching, and I'll be more tomorrow. And as I say, don't forget to share this message with your friends. God bless you.